the Wonder Twins are sort of sneaking around and overhearing something that they're probably not supposed to overhear, and it's their father sort of turning against the Sphinx. The Sphinx has finally sort of shown his cards that he's not this sort of loyal servant of the king, but is actually scheming behind the scenes and usurping the throne. And so they realize they have to get out of here. And so I designed sort of a spaceship for them. They're twins, so I came up with this sort of twin design spaceship that they're going to use to leave the planet Exor. And she has a bag that's kind of reminiscent of Scott Free's bag that he brought with him when he left the Granny Goodness orphanage in issue 1 of Mr. Miracle. And Gleek, sort of swinging around, being playful, bumps Jaina. She drops her bag, and the hollow vid pyramid falls out. And so we see a little bit more of a little glimpse of the Batgirl story, and we see a Joker tank, and now Wonder Woman sort of joined the fight, and she's standing up alongside of Batgirl up against the Joker's army that's taking over the city. So yeah, back on Earth, you got the Joker's army, you got the Green Lantern Corps, all sort of vying for the city. Yeah, the king stands up to the Sphinx, fights back, and kind of like New Gods number 7, as he's fighting back against the Sphinx, there's a lot of zapping and whatnot and the Sphinx has his army of sort of super mutants that he's created from Superman's DNA, and the Queen, the Wonder Twins' mother, gets zapped and presumed dead. The Sphinx's robe gets ripped off, and the gloves he's wearing are reminiscent of the killing gloves that Darkseid designed. And so as he rips, you see these boots, and it looks pretty much like underneath that robe is Darkseid. And I figured this is something that with this superpowers story, that I'd be able to sort of lead it, sort of usher it little by little gently into the story that I had originally envisioned for this, which would be like a story of Justice League versus Jack Kirby's New Gods, and that maybe we're headed there. And so maybe the Sphinx has been Darkseid in disguise all along. I figured so this would be sort of a tantalizing thing for people who would notice it, but also something I could walk back if ultimately word came down that no, absolutely not. You cannot use Darkseid. The answer is still no. I could walk that back. Those could be anybody's boots. Maybe he just borrowed Darkseid's boots. But now we have these sort of, Joker hovercrafts that are coming in. We saw the Joker mobile. Now we got these Joker hovercrafts. This overwhelming feeling that, there's some bad stuff coming down. Like things are going to get bad. Things are going to get worse before they get better. Batman shows up. I did not expect Batman to show up in my story, at least not this early, but then there he was, and the Joker showed up too. And by this point, they had sort of relaxed some of the rules about who I could or couldn't use. Part of it is that the decision was made that anything that happens in the Young Animal line is canon. That's why they were so careful about who you could or couldn't use, and so my Green Arrow origin is canon, but so by this point they had sort of relaxed it. They said, what, you can use Superman, you can use Batman, but they can't be sort of main characters. They can only sort of be supporting characters. So I wasn't planning to have Batman show up at this point. I wasn't planning to have the Joker, but I kind of knew, like, okay, well, now I can put the Joker in. Now it's not like I have to be coy and just not show him. I can put so the Joker shows up, and just this like feeling of sort of evil, and that everything's sort of going wrong, and Wonder Woman sort of tied up by her own lasso. In an inverted pentagram, her lasso forming an inverted pentagram, and it was a little more risque. The lasso was just sort of, covering up what it needed to cover up, and then a lot of skin was showing and stuff. And I was told we can't do that. That now again, I was sort of referencing sort of the sort of bondage history of Wonder Woman, which is it's not even a subtext or an undertone in the original William Moulston Marsden Wonder Woman comics. It's very overt, very right there on the surface. The whole bondage element, and he even talks about it in his writings at the time. So that was always part of the history. Again, I'm not everything I learned from comic books. That was something I sort of learned secondhand from people like Frank Miller, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison. And there was sort of this famous drawing that Bill Sienkiewicz did. That was part of like a pitch for him and Frank Miller to do a Wonder Woman comic, and sort of the bondage element was very heavy in there. So I was sort of referencing that. But anyway, that the Joker's attack is escalating, and so we have these levitating Joker platforms. This previous page where we saw just a little glimpse in the holo vid of Wonder Woman and Batgirl standing up to the Joker tank. Now it's like things have gone bad. Wonder Woman's been captured, tied up in her own lasso, stripped of her clothes. Now Harley Quinn is wearing them. We have all these penguins sort of marching through the city. Batgirl's in hiding. She's in the sewers like the Ninja Turtles. Armies are lining up. On one side we have the Green Lantern Corps with the Guardians of Oa. And then we have, on the other side, the Joker and his army. He's got Say Hello to My Little Friend, Oh, Solly, buried on Sunday. So I sort of have Solomon Grundy, hulked up. I thought, okay, I can use Solomon Grundy as sort of like a Hulk, DC Hulk stand-in. For Holy Oa, take flight, my children, whack, whack, whack. So Penguin's joining the fight. With his little penguin army. And I always, when Batman Returns came out, I was sort of intrigued by some of the posters and things where you'd see these penguins with cybernetic eye gear and rockets on their back. And I thought, the penguins, these flightless birds, the penguin has given them back the power of flight, and they're going to, fly through the city and, blow stuff up and cause a lot of havoc, and Batman's probably gonna have to chase him down in the Batwing and have a sort of aerial dog fight with these things. And of course, like, none of that happened. They just sort of ended up being penguins with missiles on their back that they'd launched the missile to sort of blow things up. A bit of an anticlimax, but I kept that idea in my back pocket, so I get to use it here. That the penguin commands an army of flying murderous penguins. Batgirl. Meet my Bat Girl. Harley Quinn has a spiky baseball bat like Lucille from The Walking Dead. Swings it at Batgirl. Hey Joker, you suck. Batgirl and Harley Quinn have sort of a bike duel, and Harley falls off of her Harley. And then the Joker looks at the reader and says, hey you with the comic book, I can kill you. I can kill across a universe, dear reader, thanks to him. I've done it before and I'll do it again. Pretty sinister moment when Joker starts talking to you. Like, I want it to kind of, bother you a little bit, be kind of like, what? Which is how those moments when a character suddenly starts talking to the reader, that's sort of the best you can hope for. So now, Batman comes slamming in with the Batmobile. Again, I was not planning to put him in, but just sort of circumstances, the sort of headspace I was in, it was like Batman showed up. He showed up. That's the story as it was presented to me. I who am I to judge? And so since I'm using sort of like a cinematic Batmobile, sort of stretched, kind of like the Batman animated series, but using the 1989 Michael Keaton costume, I thought, okay, add a little bit of cinematic touch. So we got a little, some film, a strip of film can be a comic too, as Scott McCloud kind of jokingly, refers in Understanding Comics. The Joker's talking hammer, says, give us a kiss. And Batgirl says, gross. I had this idea for the Joker where his hideout would be almost like Pee-wee's Playhouse, except like a murderous version of Pee-wee's Playhouse. And he would have all these sort of all this like talking furniture, talking clocks, and that mallet that he carries around from the toy would be sort of this talking, malady or something, a character like you'd have in a Pee-wee's Playhouse. I'd sort of drawn this sequence that never made it into the comic where, one of his goons is like sitting on the couch, and then the couch eats him, and then the Joker can sit on the couch. And Batman shows up. He says shields like in the Batman movie, and then the Joker says, "Batman, darling," a quote from Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, and now I get to draw, something I could have only dreamed of drawing in an actual DC comic: Batman squaring off with the Joker, and the street is wet, so you get a little reflection, and in the background, Batgirl is kicking some ass. 1989 Batman costume. It's Pittsburgh Batman, black and gold, and Michael Keaton, famous Pittsburgher. In the comics after those Batman movies came out, they changed Batman's design in those too, and it was a while before it went back to sort of the gray and blue. And I don't know what the fuck Batman's costume looks like now, but in the comics, but I liked that design. I liked it then. I like it now. Of course, I love the sort of gray, blue, and yellow Batman costume design, which is what I had sort of planned if Batman was going to show up in Superpowers, that he was going to have that blue, gray, and yellow design that he had in the 1980s toy line. It's just the way he showed up, as this story revealed to me, is he was wearing the 1989 costume. And so we have the last page of this chapter, which I introduce Supergirl. Now, when I had originally written this sequence, I had written this for Superman, but sort of told, I couldn't use Superman. And by the time I'd sort of reworked everything, like I wanted Supergirl to be, a co-star of this comic. And she hasn't shown up yet. Space is at a premium, and that she'd be in the Supermobile. So you see the Supermobile, and it's like, oh, there's Superman. You see tentacles, these sort of metal tentacles, and it's Brainiac. And he sort of, the Brainiac spaceship kind of like dwarfs the Supermobile. And I loved that 80s Brainiac design. I love the spaceship. I love that sort of, I love the toy. I love that whole like Terminator kind of look that he had. I like the old Brainiac too, but I just like this is my Brainiac. This is Brainiac, when I was a kid. And so he's, sort of an important design to me. And so Brainiac wraps his tendrils around the Supermobile. The Supermobile punches. Love it. I always loved that design of the Supermobile. I like the idea of a Supermobile. When I was a kid, it's like, wow, I knew about the Batmobile. I didn't know there was a Supermobile. And, it's got these punching fists. And as I imagined it was, this is for Superman to do these like long space voyages where he might not have access to a yellow sun. He might not be getting his powers recharged. And so he needs a ship for it. And, biff, bam, pow, he's fighting a losing battle against Brainiac. But as the ship gets in there, we see Brainiac has sort of an army of Brainiacs, and they're all different versions of Brainiac. So this Brainiac is the leader, but then these other versions of Brainiac, like from Batman the Animated Series and from the 1960s comics, those are sort of like, servant Brainiacs. And the last panel is a cover of a comic, a non-existent comic, a comic I invented, and I sort of took like a design from a Neil Adams cover for an issue of Jack Kirby's Jimmy Olsen, where they're sort of carrying Superman away. This is Brainiac saying, "If Supergirl dies, you'll have to answer to me." This design of Supergirl is a design I'd come up with early on in the planning stages for Superpowers. I was very happy about it. It was sort of like an 80s Supergirl, sort of a combination of some actual Supergirl design elements from that era, but, with a little more of like an 80s twist, kind of like thinking of Olivia Newton-John, Xanadu, that kind of thing, sort of. So she's got like, short shorts and boots and this sort of puffy shirt and a scarf tied to the side and a bandana, like a sweatband, kind of like, and she's got leg warmers on, just kind of like 80s dance outfit, something you'd wear, break dancing or something that Special K in Breakin' would wear, or one of the kids on Fame. Up to this point, you're assuming you're seeing Superman, but once the Supermobile's cracked open, you see it's Supergirl in there, and so the way this story was going to continue, it was going to become a sort of a doomed love story between Supergirl and Brainiac. I continued working on it. Hopefully maybe it'll see the light of day in some form. Maybe I'll tell it using my own creator-owned characters, or maybe, who knows, maybe I'll get a chance to tell it within the pages of a DC comic. This is my final installment of Superpowers, so I get to do something fairly close to my initial conception of Superpowers. I get to have this nice array of DC superheroes, from the classic Superpowers series. I think even this penguin drawing and this Joker drawing, I might even be referencing like an actual Jack Kirby drawing of those characters. But I got to draw, a version of the Justice League. We've got Batgirl, Batman, Dr. Fate, Green Arrow, Red Tornado, Flash, Martian Manhunter, and Firestorm. One of my favorites from that era. Sort of like the new kid in town, the new recruit to the Justice League, to the Super Friends, I should say. Captain Marvel Jr. has Stigmata from his earlier appearance in this series, where he was crucified to the Rock of Eternity. Had this series gone on longer, we might have found out how he got down from there. Up above them, great, more aliens. So now Supertown has arrived. And so I thought of Supertown, the sort of orbital city in New Genesis. I thought it's Superpowers with the Super Friends, Supertown, and make Supertown sort of mobile, because it is mobile. In New Gods, it flies around the planet. It orbits the planet New Genesis. So I thought, why can't it, come to Earth? For the defenders of the Earth, for the Super Friends, the Superpowers team, the Justice League, whatever you want to call them, it's like, oh no, another alien coming to, fuck things up. And so they say, we aren't aliens. We're friends from Supertown. We're your super friends. Your world has become infected. You've helped contain the contagion. So that was a thing I thought, hey, it's Supertown, and we're all friends. It's a place of friends. They say that in Forever People #1, I think. So I thought, Supertown, we're friends, super friends. It's in this Superpowers story that's about the Super Friends. So I thought, what if the name Super Friends sort of comes from, what the people of Supertown call themselves, the Super Friends. Sort of one of those obvious solutions that's kind of fun. And I have the Forever People showing up. Man, one of my favorites. Just Kirby's Fourth World. This is what I wanted to do. I want to do Kirby's Fourth World in the Justice League. My sort of redesigned version of the Forever People. We have Mr. Miracle. Now, maybe it's Thaddeus Brown under there, somehow back from the dead. But the way I wrote this, in my mind, it's Scott Free. Now, I don't know that it was established that we were allowed to use Scott Free or not, but Gerard had suggested, there's that painting that Jack Kirby did of Mr. Miracle, that, when he was pitching the New Gods to DC. And in that painting, he uses sort of like a yellow and brown and green color scheme for Mr. Miracle. So Gerard suggested, hey, why don't you use that color scheme? It kind of solves the problem of whether or not we can use Mr. Miracle, just kind of be like, hey, maybe it's a different character, maybe it's a different person in the costume. And it's just kind of a cool color scheme and interesting in its own right. And so I colored it that way, but it just didn't look right to me. It's like, such a big selling point of Mr. Miracle is that sort of that colorful lucha libre costume that he has. And the colors are an important part of it. So I kind of, went back. I just used the original color scheme. It just kind of like, he doesn't read as Mr. Miracle without those colors. As cool as it would have been to use those original ones, and sort of a fun nod to the fans. Like replacing his red with like a magenta. I just like it. And then we have this sort of film strip, and this is like another thing I was sort of envisioning was Joker and the Penguin get busted. It's kind of like, the Batmobile lost its wheel and the Joker got away. Just sort of this like scene of them sort of as two sort of clowns almost, with big floppy shoes running away, and they're running down the alley, and they escape into the wall. Whack, whack, Armageddon awaits. Get him, get him. Arma, get out of here. And so they disappear. And I thought of this idea of sort of, Armageddons popping up in the city on Earth. And they're sort of these like little, alleyways and streets that sort of like lead to apocalypse. And so this is one of them. There's just a million ideas. I can't even get started with like all the ideas I had for this. I had dark seeds, these sort of the seeds of doom that were in the cartoon and in the comic. I'd renamed them dark seeds, and they're sort of planted underground, and all these things, just ways that Darkseid is making Earth more like Apocalypse. And now we have the awards ceremony, kind of like the end of Star Wars. The superpowers team has defended Earth successfully, and now they're going to get their rewards. Award ceremony. Batgirl, step forward. Are they talking to me? For you, Batgirl, and your special role, we give you something special. So we see Green Arrow has received a medal, Batman's received a medal, Wonder Woman's received a medal, and now Batgirl is receiving her award. And it's Oracle, it's digital avatar that Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, uses in the comics when she becomes the character Oracle. After she's shot by the Joker, I decided to sort of reference Oracle here, and that Oracle is like a new Genesis technology that she's given, sort of something she can add to her utility belt. And it says, she's based on your personality grid. Her name is Oracle. We give you the greatest gift of all, the gift of self-knowledge. Oracle is your best self. Let her guide you in times of darkness. And then Robin says, it looks like you. And maybe being a smartass there. I sort of designed Robin to look like Bart Simpson, or, with his hair, he looked a little more like Milhouse, but sort of like Jason Todd Robin, who's like a little more mischievous, a little more, Bart Simpson, a little more like, has a, slingshot in his back pocket that he uses to break people's windows. And so I was going to draw him that way too. But when I got down to drawing this panel, it was kind of like, you know what, I'll just use like a normal drawing of Robin, just kind of, it didn't quite fit, but I did like that concept of broadening the cartoon vocabulary and using sort of like a Simpsons style, a Matt Groening style for Robin. Just sort of, fit the character, fit the era. Wonder Woman says, why do I feel like we're being condescended to? Did you notice these were all silver medals? And then Batman says, I've always dreamed of a world that no longer needs a Batman. Perhaps that day has finally come. Out steps the Forever People, and Beautiful Dreamer says, it is a beautiful dream, Bruce Wayne of Earth, but it has not yet come to pass. You're needed now more than ever. This was just the first sortie in a much larger war. Super War, and infinity is the battleground. So that's what the next phase of superpowers was going to be, had it continued. It was going to be Super War. I was going to call it Super War, which was like a title Jack Kirby used for an issue of Forever People. Things were going to ratchet up, and the conflict would be, more explicitly defined, and the stakes established, and that this is almost like a prologue to that. And Big Bear, this is my sort of redesigned version of Big Bear. I kind of gave him this kind of like robot-y sort of faceplate. This is my redesign of Beautiful Dreamer, where I sort of incorporated elements of Beautiful Dreamer's initial costume, which is like very basic, almost like a ripped up potato sack, and then combined it with like elements of her second costume that Jack Kirby designed, which was more sort of like 70s, 60s, hippie-ish, with lots of tassels and fringe and stuff. And then just adding sort of, my own sort of Kirbyisms to it, just to kind of like amp up that costume. I always loved the character of Beautiful Dreamer, and to me she's she's A-list in my book, but her costume could use a little amping up. She's Kirby does incredibly ornate costumes and incredibly simple costumes. And so she ended up with an incredibly simple costume. So I thought, what if we give her an incredibly ornate one? And I changed her color scheme to this sort of gradient of purple into magenta. Real happy with it. And then I have Viking, which, I gave him, like a big, sort of Viking, like fur cape. And I gave him like these sort of like sunglasses, goggles that sort of reference Infinity Man, who the Forever People all combined to form. And then Seraphim, the cowboy, I gave him sort of like a Tom Baker Doctor Who scarf, with all the different colors. Don't think I did much redesigning on Mark Moonrider. I feel like his costume was fine just the way it is. And Batman says, if we're in a war, who is the enemy? Who are we fighting? Heed the Unifriend, the hand of flame is pointing at the enemy. And Batgirl says, I don't see anything. And so the hand of flame, the finger is pointed right at you, the reader. And again, one of those sort of little, breaking the fourth wall. Hey, it's the fourth world. Let's break the fourth wall. One of those breaking the fourth wall tricks where it's like, okay, is this finger pointing at me? Am I the enemy? Me, the person reading this comic, am I the enemy? Maybe you are. Maybe I am. But, or maybe the finger's pointing at somebody else who's watching all of this, who we, the readers, are sort of watching through their eyes. Some evil god or goddess that's overseeing all this. Never got far enough into the series to reveal that, but Beautiful Dreamer has her thought balloon, and she's thinking, she herself is staring at the reader. Do I dare tell them? The enemy is watching all of us. Right now, reading our thoughts as words on a page. And of course, this is like, sort of, an old, DC Comics thing. Grant Morrison did in Animal Man, and Alan Moore did in Supreme and stuff, so... nothing new here, but just me, putting my spin on it, finding a context for it. So now, my contract was for 6 installments of Superpowers, and with the hopes that if it goes well, we'll renew it for another 6. So I didn't know if I thought maybe this will be it. So I wanted to make sure that these 6 tie up this story with big hopes of continuing this story in the next 6 issues. And so I sort of tied up the Wonder Twins story. And so here they're in their sort of double space, their sort of twin pod spaceship, Earth, here we come. And they decide to give themselves Earth haircuts. So they look just like average, ordinary Earthlings. So they end up with those sort of, pointy sideburn, point in the back of the head, Spock kind of haircuts that they had in the cartoon series, and they give themselves Earth clothes. And to them, Earthlings and superheroes are synonymous. So they create these sort of superhero outfits for themselves, which are, basically the outfits that they wear in the cartoon, except I've added capes. Now, my thought with superpowers and just with superheroes in general is that, the cape is the symbol of a superhero. That's part of superhero symbology going all the way back to Superman, the original. And so I thought, these characters who don't wear capes regularly, like a Spider-Man or the Flash or Green Lantern, Green Lanterns who aren't Alan Scott, I thought all these uncaped superheroes also wear capes. They just wear them at formal occasions. They wear them, for official business. So I thought, the same with the Wonder Twins. They have capes, but they, don't end up wearing them in any of the Super Friends episodes because, they were all just sort of, leisurely days. They weren't going to a wedding or some kind of official ceremony. Zan says to Jaina, on their way to Earth, do you think we'll fit in? And Jaina says, we've got the right clothes. And then in this, final panel of Superpowers Volume 1, and as it turns out, the final panel of Superpowers as a whole, their powers, once again, which they have not figured out how to control yet, manifest themselves. Zan turns into some sort of amorphous, vaporous water creature, and Jaina turns into some kind of, nightmarish, Akira kind of mutant monster beast. Gleek is kind of freaked out by the whole thing. So, the end. And so, this idea that they're off to, the next time you see them will be, within the pages of Ramona Frayden Super Friends comic or in the, Super Friends TV series. That's the next time you see them will be that. And this sort of hopeful note, they're moving on to a new life, their sort of, adventures as we know it, their journey to Earth, but that there's still going to be some bumps along the way. It's not going to be smooth sailing. There's some kinks to iron out and some adventures to be had. So that's the end of the series. Thank you for spending this time with me and with Superpowers. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design and Superpowers. And I'll see you next time.